Commander Dae-ho Kim sat in the massive council chamber and watched 12 different alien species argue about the same problem they had been discussing for 3 days. The Centaurus council chamber was bigger than any building on Earth. Its walls were made of some kind of crystal that showed the stars outside. Right now, those stars looked very far away. The problem was simple to understand, but impossible to solve. Something called the Vorthon Plague was eating entire star systems. It had been doing this for 200 years. Every planet it touched became dead and empty. The plague was spreading faster now, and scientists said it would reach the center of the galaxy in 50 years. Dae-ho looked at the other humans sitting with him. Dr. Minji Park was taking notes on her tablet. She was the smartest person he knew when it came to energy and life forms. Taiki Wu was drawing something in his notebook. Taiki was an engineer who liked to build things in ways that surprised everyone. The Velthan speaker was talking now. The Velthans looked like living crystals and thought in perfect math. Their speaker's voice sounded like music made of numbers. "We have calculated every possible barrier," the Velthon said. "Quantum shields, temporal walls, dimensional blocks. Nothing stops the plague. Our mathematics show no solution exists." A Garathi general stood up next. The Garathi looked like giant insects and had the best weapons in the galaxy. "We tried destroying it with our strongest weapons," the general said in a voice that buzzed like angry bees. "Planet-killer bombs, star-melting lasers, black hole generators. The plague just absorbed everything and grew stronger." Dae-ho had heard this same conversation many times. Each species had tried their best solution. The Noimari had used their mind powers to try to control the plague. The Zephyrians had tried to freeze it with ice that could stop time. The Korthani had tried to trap it in a prison made of solid gravity. Nothing worked. "Perhaps we should evacuate the core worlds," suggested a Numari elder. The Numari had big heads and could talk without moving their mouths. "Move all life to the outer rim and let the plague have the center. That is surrender," growled the Garathi general. "We do not run from threats." "Running is better than dying," said a small voice from the corner. The speaker was from a race that looked like floating jellyfish. "My people tried to fight. Now we have only 3 worlds left." The arguing got louder. Some species wanted to build a giant wall around the galactic center. Others wanted to find a new galaxy and leave this one behind. A few suggested they should wake up the old ones, ancient beings that had been sleeping for millions of years. Dae-ho watched and listened. He had been a soldier before he became a diplomat. In the army, he had learned that sometimes the best way to solve a problem was to stop thinking about it the same way everyone else did. Dr. Minji leaned over and whispered, "They all think the plague is a weapon or a natural disaster." "What do you think it is?" Dae-ho asked quietly. "I'm not sure yet. But I know one thing. Everything alive wants something, even things that seem like they just destroy." Taiki looked up from his notebook. "You know what's funny? They're all trying to build bigger walls or stronger weapons. Nobody's asking what the plague actually wants." The Velthon speaker was talking about some new kind of math that could predict where the plague would go next. The Garathi general was explaining a plan to build robot soldiers that could fight in the energy storms the plague created. Other aliens were suggesting more and more complex solutions. Dae-ho stood up. The chamber got quiet. Humans were new to galactic politics. Earth had only been part of the galactic community for about 100 years. Most aliens saw humans as young and not very smart compared to species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. "Commander Kim," said the council. "Leader." a being that looked like a tree made of gold. "Do the humans have a suggestion?" Deho looked around the chamber. Hundreds of alien eyes were watching him. These beings had technology that could move planets and minds that could think in 12 dimensions. Their species had solved problems that humans couldn't even understand. But they had all failed to stop the plague. "Leave it to us," Deho said, in a clear, calm voice. The chamber was silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then the Garathi general made a sound like laughing and choking at the same time. Several other aliens started buzzing, clicking, or humming in what Deho guessed was amusement. "Humans," said the Veltan speaker, "your species has barely learned to travel faster than light. You have no special abilities. Your technology is centuries behind ours. What could you possibly do that we cannot?" "We think differently," Minji said, standing up next to Deho. "Differently how?" asked the tree-like council leader. Taiki stood up too. "We don't know yet, but we'll figure it out." The Garathi general's wings buzzed with annoyance. "This is not a time for games. Trillions of lives are at stake." "We're not playing games," Deho said. "We're serious. Give us a chance." "What do you need?" asked a new voice. It came from a Noimari elder who had been quiet during most of the meeting. This elder's mental voice felt different from the others. Curious instead of dismissive. "Time," Deho said, "and access to all the data you have about the plague. Everything you've tried, everything you've learned." "How much time?" asked the council leader. Deho looked at Minji and Taeki. They had talked about this on the ship coming here. 6 months. More alien laughter filled the chamber. 6 months? The Velthan speaker said. "We have studied this for 2 centuries. "Maybe that's the problem," Taiki said with a small smile. The council leader raised what might have been a hand. The laughter stopped. "The humans will have their 6 months. But understand this, Commander Kim. If you fail, we will have to consider the evacuation plans or worse options." Deho nodded. He understood. Some of the more desperate species were probably thinking about trying to wake those ancient old ones, or maybe running away to another galaxy. Both options would mean giving up everything they had built here. "We won't fail," he said. As the meeting ended and aliens began filing out of the chamber, Deho heard many conversations in languages he didn't understand. But he could guess what they were saying. The humans were too young, too simple, too weak. They would fail like everyone else. Maybe. They were right. Humans didn't have crystal brains that could do perfect math. They couldn't read minds or build black hole weapons. They were just humans. But Deho remembered something his grandfather had told him when he was young. The nail that sticks up gets hammered down. But sometimes, the nail that comes from a different angle goes right through. Walking back to their ship, Minji asked, "Do you really think we can solve this?" "I don't know," Deho said honestly. "But I know we see things differently than they do. Maybe that's enough." Taeki was already sketching new ideas in his notebook. "When do we start?" "Right now," Deho said. "We have 6 months to save the galaxy." The 3 humans walked toward their small ship, past aliens who whispered and stared. Above them, the crystal walls of the council chamber showed the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vorthan plague was still spreading, still consuming worlds. But for the first time in 200 years, someone had said they would stop it, and that someone was human. 3 weeks after the council meeting, Daeho stood in Earth's Global Crisis Center and watched the strangest team of experts he had ever assembled. The center was built inside a mountain in Colorado. Its walls were covered with screens showing data from across the galaxy. Dr. Hyunwoo Chang was studying pictures of creatures that lived at the bottom of Earth's oceans. He was a marine biologist, not a space scientist. Most people thought this was a strange choice, but Hyunwoo had asked to see the data about the plague, and his first words had been, "This looks familiar." Professor Soo-Young Lee was reading reports about how different human cultures had survived disasters throughout history. She studied people, not technology. But she had pointed out something interesting. Every species in the galaxy approached the plague problem the same way. They all tried to fight it or hide from it. Engineer Ji-won Han was taking apart alien communication devices and putting them back together in ways that probably violated several galactic patents. She had been kicked out of 3 universities for building things that weren't supposed to work but somehow did. Dr. Minho Choi was drawing pictures that looked like chaos, but were actually advanced mathematics. He studied quantum physics and chaos theory. He believed that the universe was more random and strange than most people wanted to admit. Captain Yunbi Nam was studying military reports from the plague zones, but not in the way other generals had. Instead of looking for ways to fight the plague, she was looking for patterns in how it moved and what it avoided. "Tell me again why we're not using the big computers and the smart AI systems," Taiki said. He was sitting at a table covered with pieces of alien technology and human electronics. "Because they think like the aliens think," Daeho explained. "Logic first, then more logic. We need to think like humans." Minji was looking at energy readings from plague-affected areas. "The aliens are right about one thing. This plague is unlike anything we've seen. It doesn't behave like a weapon or a natural disaster." "That's what I keep telling you," Hyunwoo said, looking up from his ocean creature photos. "Look at these bacteria from the thermal vents near Japan. They live in conditions that should kill them. Extreme heat, crushing pressure, toxic chemicals. But they don't just survive, they thrive." He put one of his photos on the main screen. It showed tiny organisms that glowed with their own light. These little guys need the deadly environment to live. What looks like hell to us is paradise to them. What if the plague is the same way? "You think the plague is alive?" Yunbi asked. "I think everything is alive in some way," Hyunwoo said. "Even things that don't look alive to us." Soo-young looked up from her historical reports. Every human culture has stories about monsters or disasters that turned out to be something else. Gods who were angry, spirits who were lost, creatures who were just hungry. "So you think the plague is hungry?" Ji-won asked, while rewiring something that was definitely not supposed to be rewired. "I think it wants something," So-young said. "Everything wants something." Minho had been quiet for most of the discussion. Now he walked over to the main screen and started drawing equations in the air. The screen captured his movements and turned them into glowing mathematical symbols. "Chaos theory says that complex systems can have simple causes," he said. "Maybe we're looking at this backward. Everyone sees the plague consuming planets and thinks it's destruction. But what if it's construction?" "Construction of what?" Daeho asked. "I don't know yet. But look at these patterns." Minho's equations filled the screen. "The plague doesn't move randomly. It follows specific paths between stars. It avoids certain types of planets and goes straight for others. That's not destruction. That's selection." Ji-won held up a device she had been working on. It looked like a radio had crashed into a crystal and somehow survived. "I've been trying to listen to the plague zones," she said. The aliens tried this too, but they were looking for normal communication patterns. Language, mathematics, encoded. Data! I'm looking for something else. What kind of something else? Minji asked. Music, Jiwon said. Rhythm. Patterns that feel good instead of patterns that make sense. She plugged her device into the main computer system. Strange sounds filled the room. They were not quite music and not quite noise, but there was something almost familiar about them. That's interesting, Yunbi said. It sounds like it's trying to sing but doesn't know how. Exactly, Jiwon said, getting excited. What if the plague is trying to communicate, but not in any way the other species recognize? Hyunwoo put down his photos and walked over to listen to the sounds. You know, when my deep-sea bacteria are happy, they make chemical signals. Different chemicals for different messages. But they also vibrate in certain ways. Like they're humming. The plague might be humming too, So-young added. In human cultures, music and art are how we connect with others, how we show who we are, inside. Daeho felt something clicking together in his mind. It was the same feeling he used to get in the army when a battle plan suddenly made sense. What if the aliens are wrong about what the plague is? He said slowly. They think it's a disease or a weapon. But what if it's a person? The room got very quiet. Everyone was thinking. A person that's the size of star systems, Minho said. Finally. A person that doesn't know how to talk to people like us, Jiwon added. A person that's been alone for 200 years, So-young said softly. Yunbi was looking at her military reports with new eyes. If it's trying to communicate, then the way it moves makes sense. It goes to populated systems because that's where the people are. And when it doesn't get a response it understands, it tries harder, Hyunwoo said. Like my bacteria do when their environment changes. They release more chemicals, change their behavior. Which looks like destruction to us, Minji said, but might be desperation to the plague. Taiki looked up from his work. So how do we talk to it? That was the big question. The aliens had tried mathematics and logic and force. None of that had worked, but humans had other ways of communicating. We need to speak human, Daeho said. Over the next few days, the team worked on the strangest project in human history. Instead of building weapons or shields, they were building a way to have a conversation with something that lived between the stars. Jiwon created communication devices that could send music and art into space. Not just any music, but songs that felt like friendship and curiosity instead of fear and anger. Hyunwoo studied how living things on Earth communicated with chemical signals and vibrations. He thought the plague might understand these biological languages better than technological ones. So-young collected stories and myths and poems from every human culture. She was looking for universal human messages. Things that said, we are here, we are alive, we want to know you. Minho worked on mathematics that looked like art, and art that followed mathematical rules. He believed that beauty and truth were connected in ways that logic alone couldn't explain. Yunbi planned how to approach the plague zones safely. Instead of attacking or running away, she designed flight paths that looked like dancing. Movement that said, we come in peace in a language older than words. Meanwhile, reports came in from across the galaxy. The other species were still trying their old methods. Bigger weapons, stronger shields, more complex plans. None of them were working. The plague was spreading faster. Some aliens were starting to panic. The Garathi were building a fleet of robot warriors. The Velthons were creating a mathematical prison that could trap the plague in equations. The Numari were gathering their strongest mind readers to try to control the plague with thought. "They're going to make it angry," Su-Yung said after. "Reading the latest reports. Maybe it already is angry," Yunwoo said. "Imagine being alone for hundreds of years, trying to talk to people and having them shoot weapons at you every time you get close." "We need to try our approach soon," Daeho said, "before the other species do something that makes the situation worse." The team had been working for 2 months. Their communication system was ready. It wasn't like anything the aliens had built. It was weird and creative and very, very human. "Are we really going to try to make friends with something that eats planets?" Taiki asked. "We're going to try to understand something that might not be eating planets at all," Daeho replied. "We're going to listen instead of assuming," Minji looked at all the data they had collected. "If we're wrong, the galaxy loses nothing. It hasn't already lost." "And if we're right?" Yunbi asked. Daeho smiled. "If we're right, we're about to make the biggest friend in galactic history." The human team prepared to leave Earth and travel to the edge of the plague zones. They were bringing tools for communication, not weapons for war. They were bringing curiosity instead of fear. Behind them, the other galactic species were preparing for battle. Ahead of them, something vast and lonely was waiting among the stars. The 6 months were half over. It was time to find out if humans really could solve the impossible. The human ship moved through space toward the edge of the plague zone. It was a small vessel compared to the massive alien warships that patrolled the area, but it carried something those ships didn't have. It carried hope instead of weapons. Daeho watched the stars change color as they got closer to the affected region. Space here looked sick. The normal darkness was filled with strange lights that pulsed and swirled like oil on water. "Energy readings are off the charts," Minji reported from her station. "But it's not chaotic like the alien report suggested. There's a pattern here." Ji-Won was at the communication station, surrounded by the strange devices she had built. Half of them looked like musical instruments, and the other half looked like nothing anyone had ever seen before. "I'm picking up those sounds again," she said. "The humming we heard back on Earth. It's stronger here, almost like it's excited." Hyunwoo was studying his biological scanners. "You know what's weird? I'm detecting life signs in the plague zone. Not dead space like the alien report said. Different life, but definitely alive." Through the ship's windows, they could see their destination. It had once been a planet called Kepler 442b. The alien record said the plague had consumed it 3 years ago, leaving nothing but a dead rock. But what they saw didn't look dead. The planet was covered in flowing lights that moved like rivers of stars, structures that might have been cities or might have been something else entirely grew from the surface like crystal trees. "That's not destruction," So-Young said quietly. "That's art." Captain Yunbi was flying the ship in the careful dance pattern she had designed. Instead of approaching in a straight line like a military vessel, she moved in curves and spirals that said "friend" in the ancient language of movement. The response was immediate. The flowing lights on the planet began to pulse in rhythm with their flight path. The humming sounds Ji-Won was detecting became clearer, more musical. "It's copying us," Yunbi said with wonder in her voice. "It's trying to dance back." Dr. Minho was working with equations that described the movement of the lights below. "This is incredible. The energy patterns are following mathematical rules, but they're also following artistic ones. It's like watching someone solve a math problem by painting a picture." Suddenly, alarms started going off. Other ships were approaching fast. Big ships with lots of weapons. Garathi battle fleet, Minji reported. 12 ships, all armed with plasma cannons. The lead Garathi ship sent a message. The voice was the same buzzing tone they remembered from the council meeting. Human vessel, you are in extreme danger. Leave the area immediately. We are beginning our attack on the plague entity. Deho opened a communication channel. Garathi fleet, please hold your attack. We are attempting first contact. First contact? The Garathi general sounded like he was choking on his own words. This is not a being to contact. This is a disease to cure. We don't think it's a disease, Deho said. We think it's alive and trying to communicate. Your thinking is wrong. We have weapons that will cleanse this system. Move away or be destroyed with the plague. The Garathi ships began charging their weapons. Energy readings spiked as massive cannons prepared to fire. But something else was happening. The lights on the planet below began to pulse faster. The humming sounds became urgent, almost afraid. It knows they're going to attack, Jiwan said. Listen to those sounds. That's not anger. That's fear. Hyunwoo was watching his biological scanners. The life signs are changing. Everything down. There is trying to hide or protect itself. Like a child hiding from bullies, Soo-young added. Yunbi made a decision. Instead of running away from the Garathi ships, she flew their small vessel between the battle fleet and the planet. Human ship, move! The Garathi general ordered. No, Daiho said simply. You'll have to shoot through us, if that is what it takes. The Garathi ships opened fire, but not at the planet. Warning shots flew past the human vessel. The message was clear. Move or die. But Jiwan had an idea. She activated all of her communication devices at once. Music filled the space around their ship. Not just any music, but songs of protection and friendship. Lullabies that human mothers sang to frightened children. Songs that said, "You are safe. You are not alone." The response from the planet was immediate. The flowing lights began to move in new patterns. Structures rose from the surface. Not weapons, but something that looked like giant flowers made of energy. What is that? Minho asked. I think it's beautiful, So-young said. The energy flowers began to release something into space. Clouds of sparkling particles that drifted toward both the human ship and the Garathi fleet. Contamination alert! The Garathi general shouted. The plague is attacking! But the particles weren't attacking. When they reached the ships, they began to form pictures in space. Images made of light and energy that told a story. The first image showed a vast loneliness, something huge and alone drifting between empty stars. The second image showed the discovery of life. Worlds with cities and people and all the beautiful complexity of civilization. The third image showed attempts at contact, gentle approaches that were met with fear and violence. The fourth image showed confusion and sadness. Why did the small beings run away? Why did they attack? The fifth image showed hope. New small beings who danced instead of fighting, who sang instead of shooting. It's trying to tell us its story, Jiwan said with tears in her eyes. Even the Garathi seemed confused. Their weapons were still charged, but they weren't firing. This is some kind of trick, the general said, but his voice was less certain than before. More images appeared. They showed what happened to the planets the plague touched. Not destruction, but transformation. The beings that lived there weren't killed. They were changed, elevated, connected to something larger and more wonderful than they had been before. The people who lived on these worlds, Hyunwoo said, studying his scanners, they're still there. They're part of something bigger now. It's not eating civilizations, Minji realized. It's inviting them to join something. The images kept coming. They showed a vision of the galaxy connected and unified. Different species working together, sharing knowledge and beauty and wonder. Not through conquest or control, but through voluntary joining. It wants friends, So Young said simply. It's been trying to make friends for 200 years, and everyone keeps running away or shooting at it. Daeho opened a communication channel to the Garathi fleet. General, are you seeing this? I see tricks and lies, the general replied, but he sounded less sure than before. What if they're not lies? What if we've been wrong about everything? More human ships were arriving. The rest of their team had come in a larger vessel with more communication equipment. The space around the planet filled with human music and art and stories. The plague's response was like watching a flower bloom in fast motion. The entire planet began to transform, becoming something that was part city, part garden, and part living artwork. Incoming message from Galactic Command, Minji reported. The Velthan fleet is approaching from the other side of the system. They're bringing some kind of mathematical weapon. And the Numari are sending their mind controllers, Yunbi added, reading another report. The plague entity seemed to sense the approaching danger. The lights on the planet began to pulse in patterns. That felt like panic. It's afraid, Jiwan said. All it wants is to make friends, and instead it's going to be attacked by 3 different fleets. Daeho made a decision that would change galactic history. He opened a channel to every ship in the system, human, Garathi, and the approaching alien fleets. This is Commander Daeho Kim of Earth, he said in a clear, strong voice. I'm ordering all ships to stand down. We are in the presence of a new form of life that has been trying to communicate with us for centuries. Any attack on this entity will be considered an act of war against Earth. You cannot order us around, human, the Garathi general replied. Your species has no military power here. You're right, Daeho said. We don't have big weapons or powerful armies, but we have something else. We have the ability to make first contact with a new friend, and we won't let you destroy that chance. The human ships moved into protective positions around the planet. They were tiny compared to the alien battle fleets, but their message was clear. To hurt this new life form, you'll have to go through us. On the planet below, the lights pulsed in what could only be gratitude. The real test was about to begin. The alien fleets were approaching, and they brought enough firepower to destroy star systems. The humans had only their small ships and their belief that communication was better than violence. But for the first time in 200 years, the plague entity wasn't alone. It had found the friends it had been looking for. The question was, would friendship be enough to stop a war? The space around Kepler 442b became the most dangerous place in the galaxy. 3 alien battle fleets surrounded the transformed planet, their weapons charged and ready. Between them and their target, a small group of human ships held a protective formation. Daeho watched the tactical display and tried not to think about how hopeless their situation looked. The Garathi had plasma cannons that could melt planets. The Velthan ships carried mathematical weapons that could trap matter in impossible equations. The Numari fleet brought mind controllers who could drive entire populations insane. Against all of that, the humans had 20 ships, and a dream that talking was better than fighting. The Velthan commander is requesting communication, Minji reported. Put him through, Daeho said. The voice that came through the speakers sounded like crystal bells ringing in perfect harmony. Human Commander Kim, your actions are mathematically... Impossible to understand. You protect a force that has consumed 847 star systems. Logic demands its destruction. Logic got us into this mess, Daiho replied. Maybe it's time to try something else. There is nothing else. Mathematics is truth. This entity represents chaos. Before Daiho could answer, something wonderful happened. The planet below began to sing. It wasn't the confused humming they had heard before. This was clear, beautiful music that filled space with harmony. The song told the story of loneliness and hope, of searching and finding, of fear becoming friendship. But more than that, it was singing in mathematics. Perfect, beautiful equations that even the Velthons could understand. The entity was speaking their language, but it was speaking it with love instead of cold logic. Impossible, the Velthan commander whispered. Mathematics cannot express emotion. Your mathematics can't, Jiwan said from the communication station. But maybe there are other kinds of math. Math that includes feelings and dreams and all the messy, wonderful things that make life worth living. The Nomari fleet commander's mental voice entered their minds. It felt like ice and sharp edges. This creature is trying to seduce you with false promises. We can sense its true nature. It seeks to absorb all consciousness into itself. No, said a new voice. This one came from the planet below, transmitted through Jiwan's communication devices. It was vast and old and gentle, like the voice of a mountain that had learned to speak. I do not absorb, the entity said. I connect. I offer partnership, not conquest. For so long, I have been alone among the stars. When I found worlds with thinking beings, I hoped to share my existence with them. But they feared me. You destroyed civilizations, the Garathi general buzzed, angrily. I transformed them, the entity replied sadly. I gave them a choice to join something greater than themselves. Some chose to become part of my consciousness while keeping their own thoughts and feelings. Others chose to remain as they were, but connected to a larger community. I forced no one. Hyunwoo was studying his biological scanners. Commander, I'm detecting millions of different life signs on the planet, not just from the entity, but from all the species that supposedly died there. They're all still alive, still individual, but somehow connected. Show us, Soo-young said. The planet's response was to create another display of light images in space. But these images moved and lived. They showed cities where beings from dozens of different species worked and played together. Humans and aliens, who had chosen to join the entity's consciousness, lived alongside others who had chosen to remain independent but connected. The images showed children playing games that spanned continents, their thoughts linked so they could share joy and wonder directly. They showed artists creating beauty that combined the best ideas from 100 different cultures. They showed scientists solving problems by thinking together in ways that no single species could manage alone. It's not death, Minji breathed. It's evolution. Evolution toward what? The Velthan commander asked. Toward community, the entity replied. Toward an end to loneliness, to misunderstanding, to the fear and hate that keeps thinking beings apart. I offer connection without conquest, unity without uniformity. And what about those who don't want to join? Yunbi asked. The images changed to show orbital stations and moon colonies where beings lived in their original forms. They were connected to the entity's communication network, but remained completely themselves. They could talk to any being in the galaxy instantly, share knowledge and art and friendship, but their thoughts and choices remained their own. "I force no one," the entity repeated. "But I offer the choice. For those who wish to remain as they are, I provide protection and connection. For those who wish to become more than they were, I offer transformation." The Numeri commander's mental voice was confused now instead of angry. "We sense no deception. This being truly believes what it says, because it's telling the truth," Suyong said. "This is what humanity has been trying to achieve for thousands of years. Community without losing individuality. Understanding without giving up what makes us unique." The Gorathi general was less convinced. "This is still conquest, disguised as friendship." "No," said a new voice. This one came from the planet, but it sounded different, smaller and more familiar. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Horizon," the voice said. "My ship was caught in what you call a plague zone 5 years ago. We were sure we were going to die. Instead, we were offered a choice. The communication channel filled with more voices, beings from dozens of species, all speaking from the transformed worlds. I am Commander Vex of the Gorathi cruiser Stinger. I chose to join the entity's consciousness. I am still myself, but I am also part of something wonderful. I am Dr. Yenna of the Velthan Research Station. I chose to remain independent but connected. I can still do my own research, but I can also share thoughts with the greatest minds in the galaxy. I am Elder Koss of the Noimari colony ship. I chose transformation from my damaged mind. The loneliness and pain I carried for centuries is gone, replaced by the joy of genuine connection." Voice after voice spoke up. Beings who had supposedly died in the plague zones, now alive and happy and free to choose their own paths. "You see," the entity said gently, "I destroy nothing that does not wish to be transformed. I threaten no one who does not threaten others. I seek only to end the great loneliness that separates all thinking beings." The 3 alien fleets were silent. Their weapons were still charged, but the certainty that had driven them here was cracking. "If this is true," the Velthan commander said slowly, "then we have made a terrible mistake. We have spent 2 centuries fighting something that wanted to be our friend," the Noimari added. "But how do we know it's really true?" the Gorathi general asked. "How do we know this isn't some elaborate trick?" Daiho smiled. "There's only one way to find out. He opened a channel to Earth and to the other human colonies. This is Commander Kim. I'm sending a full report on our contact with the entity, but more than that, I'm asking for volunteers." "Volunteers for what?" Minji asked. "To be the first humans to make direct contact? To show the galaxy that trust is better than fear." Within minutes, responses came pouring in from across human space. Thousands of people volunteering to be the first to meet the entity face to face. Scientists who wanted to share knowledge, artists who wanted to share beauty, ordinary people who were tired of being alone in a vast universe. "I'll go first," Daiho said. "We'll all go," Jiwon added. The human team prepared to transport down to the planet's surface. They left their weapons behind and brought only gifts, music and art and stories, and the simple human desire to make a new friend. As their shuttle approached the planet, the entity's voice filled their minds, not forcing its way in, but asking politely for permission to communicate directly. "Welcome," it said when they accepted. "I have waited so long for beings who would approach with curiosity instead of fear. The planet's surface was more beautiful than any paradise they had ever imagined." cities that grew like living things, rivers of light that carried thoughts and dreams, gardens where every flower was a work of art created by the combined imagination of 1,000 species. And everywhere, beings from across the galaxy lived and worked together in harmony. "This is what I offer," the entity said. "Not conquest, but community. Not death, but transformation into something greater. Will humanity be the first to accept my friendship freely?" Deho looked at his team, then up at the ships in orbit that were still deciding whether to attack or retreat. "Yes," he said simply, "humanity accepts." Above them, the alien fleets powered down their weapons. The war that had raged for 2 centuries was over, ended not by victory or defeat, but by understanding. The plague was not a plague at all. It was a friend who had been waiting patiently for someone brave enough to say hello. 5 years had passed since the day humans first said hello to the entity that had been called a plague. Now, standing on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, Deho watched the most beautiful sight in the galaxy. The station floated in, space between 7 different star systems, all of them transformed by what everyone now called the network. Rivers of light connected the worlds, carrying messages and dreams and the shared thoughts of billions of beings who had chosen to join something larger than themselves. "Hard to believe we almost destroyed all of this," said a familiar buzzing voice behind him. Deho turned to see General Corax, the same Garathi commander who had wanted to attack the network 5 years ago. Now, Corax served as the military advisor to the Galactic Unity Council, the new government that had formed when species across the galaxy realized they no longer needed to fight each other. "Good thing humans are stubborn," Deho replied with a smile. Through the observation deck's windows, they could see ships from dozens of species working together on construction projects that would have been impossible before. Velthon mathematical precision combined with human creativity and Garathi engineering skill to build wonders that no single species could have imagined. "Daily report, Commander," Minji said, approaching with a tablet in her hands. She was now the director of interspecies communication, helping other species learn the human art of talking to difficult problems instead of fighting them. "The colony on New Terra has reached 1 million residents," she continued. "All volunteers from 43 different species. The integration is going better than expected." New Terra was one of the worlds that had been consumed by the plague. Now it was home to the galaxy's first truly integrated community, where beings could choose their level of connection to the network. Some joined completely, sharing their consciousness while keeping their individuality. Others remained independent but connected, able to communicate instantly with anyone in the galaxy. Still others lived traditionally but benefited from the network's protection and knowledge sharing. "Any problems?" Deho asked. "The usual growing pains. Some species are still learning to live together, but nothing serious. Disputes get resolved through the network's mediation system before they can become conflicts. That was one of the most amazing changes. When beings could literally share their thoughts and feelings, it became almost impossible to maintain hatred or misunderstanding. Wars that had raged for centuries ended when both sides could finally understand each other's perspectives. Taiki appeared from one of the engineering sections, covered in some kind of glowing dust. "The new communication array is working perfectly," he announced. "We can now reach the Outer Rim galaxies. The network is excited about making contact with whatever civilizations might be out there." The network had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What had started as a single lonely consciousness had become a community of trillions. Every species that chose to join brought their own knowledge, culture, and way of thinking. The result was a collective intelligence that could solve problems no single group could handle alone. But the network never forced anyone to join. Entire species had chosen to remain independent, and they were welcomed as friends and partners. The key insight that humans had brought to the galaxy was simple. Cooperation was always more powerful than conquest. Speaking of the network, Jiwan said, walking up to join them. She now wore a small crystal device on her forehead that allowed her to communicate directly with the network's consciousness. It wants to show us something. The lights in the observation deck dimmed, and holographic displays filled the space around them. They showed star charts of unexplored regions beyond the galactic edge. The network's voice filled their minds, as gentle and vast as ever. My friends, we have detected something interesting in the void beyond our galaxy. Signals that suggest another consciousness like myself, but older and much more lonely. The displays zoomed in on a region of empty space between galaxies. Energy patterns swirled in the darkness, similar to the network's own signature, but somehow, sadder, it has been alone for millions of years, the network continued. Its signals speak of despair and isolation. I believe it has given up hope of ever finding others like itself. Hyunwoo was studying the readings on his portable scanner. The biological patterns are fascinating. It's like the network, but evolved differently. More focused on preservation than growth. What do you want to do about it? Soo-young asked the network. I want to reach out to it. To offer it the same friendship that humanity offered me. But the distance is vast, and I am not sure my signals can reach that far. Yunbi was already thinking like a strategist. We could build relay stations, chain them across the void between galaxies. That would take decades, Minho calculated. Maybe centuries. We have time, Daeho said. And we have something more important than time. We have the will to help. Over the following months, the greatest engineering project in galactic history began. Species from across the network worked together to design communication relays that could span the emptiness between galaxies. It was a massive undertaking that required new technologies and unprecedented cooperation. But as the project progressed, something wonderful happened. The work itself became a celebration of unity. Beings who had once been enemies now shared tools and knowledge freely. Artists from different species collaborated on designs that were both functional and beautiful. Children from dozens of worlds sent messages of hope that would be included in the first transmission to the lonely consciousness in the void. The day came when the relay chain was complete. Representatives from every species in the galaxy gathered at New Harmony Station to witness the moment of contact. Initiating long-range transmission, Jiwan announced from the communication station. The message that went out was not just from the network, but from every thinking being in the galaxy. It was a symphony of voices saying the same thing in countless different ways. You are not alone anymore. For hours, they waited for a response. The distance was so vast that even traveling at the speed of light, their message would take time to reach its destination. Then, faintly, a reply came back. It was a sound like crying, but crying with joy instead of sadness. The voice that spoke was ancient and tired, but filled with sudden hope. Is this real? The distant consciousness asked. Are there truly others like me? Many others, the network replied, and we would like to be your friends. The celebration that followed lasted for weeks. Across the galaxy, beings who had once fought each other now worked together to prepare for the arrival of their new friend. Construction began on a new type of world, one designed specifically for the needs of a consciousness that had been alone for millions of years. But the real celebration was quieter and more personal. In the council chambers where the crisis had begun 5 years earlier, the same beings who had once argued about destroying the plague now planned how to welcome another ancient mind into their community. The crystal tree being who served as council leader turned to Daeho. "Commander Kim, once again your species has done the impossible. How do humans consistently find solutions that elude the rest of us?" Daeho looked around the room at the representatives from dozens of species, all working together on plans that would have been unthinkable before humanity learned to make friends with the unknown. "We don't see problems as things to defeat," he said. "We see them as puzzles to solve, friends we haven't met yet, or stories waiting to have happy endings." "And when you meet something you don't understand?" Daeho smiled. "We say hello." As if summoned by his words, a new alarm sounded throughout the station. But this wasn't a warning of danger. It was an alert that long-range sensors had detected something new at the very edge of explored space. The displays filled with images of a phenomenon unlike anything they had seen before. It was massive and complex and completely mysterious. The council members looked at the readings with confusion and concern. Some began suggesting military expeditions or scientific surveys or mathematical analysis. But they all stopped talking when they noticed Daeho standing up with a familiar look in his eyes. "Commander?" the council leader asked. "Do you have a suggestion?" Daeho looked at the mystery on the screens, then at his human colleagues who were already reaching for their communication equipment, then at the alien representatives who were learning to trust in human solutions. "Leave it to us," he said with quiet confidence. And somewhere in the network's vast consciousness, something that had once been called a plague began to hum with anticipation. Another puzzle was waiting to be solved. Another friend was waiting to be discovered. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson humans had to teach. Every problem was just another opportunity to make the universe a little less lonely. The humans were ready for whatever came next. They always were.